Hi everyone. So in this video, we will be dealing with the previous year questions that were asked from the literary theory called post-structuralism. And we will be dealing with the questions that were asked from December 2018 to December 2022. So we will be covering each and every shifts of these 6 years. So let's look at the theory that is post-structuralism. So we know about post-structuralism. Post-structuralism is actually a very important theory when it comes to literature and also when it comes to NTA NET exam. There were numerous times many questions were repeated. There are different authors who has got high weightage compared to other theorists. Anyway, if we speak about post-structuralism, we have to say that post-structuralism is actually a theoretical framework that emerged in the 1960s and 1970s, and it became a dominant intellectual movement at a time. So it came as a response to structuralism, and we know that while structuralism is sought to uncover the universal structures and underlying rules that govern human behavior, about human language, what did post-structuralism did is that post-structuralism challenged the idea of fixed or objective structures and emphasized the role of language, power and subjectivity in shaping meaning and knowledge. So that is one thing that we have to say about post-structuralism. And anyway, we know about the important writers that comes under post-structuralism. So though it may sound hard, we know that the questions that were asked from post-structuralism are quite simple and are easy to answer once you know what the theory actually means or what the theory actually signifies. Anyway, let's look at the questions that were asked from post-structuralism. So in December 2018, there was a question that was asked from deconstruction. Deconstructionist critics argue that texts are never free from. So here, as I said earlier, you have to understand what deconstruction is. Deconstruction is actually the, we can say, the spoke word for post-structuralism. It is almost used as, if post-structuralism is a movement, deconstruction is actually a practice of reading. Okay, so here one thing that you have to keep in mind is that while you study a theory, you have to be very clear about the ideas followed in that theory. So here you can answer this question if you know what deconstruction is. What is the practice of deconstruction? So anyway, let's look at the question once again. Deconstructionist critics argue that texts are never free from. So there are four options: the equivocal and ironically unstable worldview of the author, the material conditions that determine the production and reception, distortions inherent in the rhetoricity of language, the interpretations bestowed by the totalizing critic. So these are the four options that were given. So here you have to understand that according to deconstructionism, or according to the theorists who believe in deconstruction, what is the thing that a text is never free from? So before looking at the answer, let's look at what this deconstruction is. So we know that Derrida, he extends the notion of a text beyond the boundaries of a physical text to the realms of reality, society and identity. So we know Derrida was the first person who brought deconstructions or post-structuralism into popularity, and according to Derrida, he extends the notion of a text. The very question of what is a text is extended beyond the boundaries of a physical text to the realm of reality, society and identity. So according to him, reality is a system of shifting signifiers and everything takes on a textualized form and can be analyzed according to the deconstructive method. So here, under post-structuralism, everything is scrutinized or everything is analyzed according to this deconstructive method. So reality is a system of shifting signifiers. Once a signifier gets into a meaning, that is, once a signifier reaches the concept of a signified, this signified in turn becomes another signifier for the next signified. So these signifier-signified relation signifier-signified relation keeps on getting postponed. So since the notion of centrality is under erasure, so according to deconstruction, the concept of center is not something that is fixed, or it is not something that is fundamental, or it is not something that is always legitimate. It is always shifting. The center keeps on shifting, or we can say the center is always under erasure. So when the center is under erasure, what happens? The margins will never always remain the margins, and neither the center always remain the center. The margins will become the center will become the margin, and this process keeps on processing. So that is what happens in deconstruction, and hierarchies or oppositions need to be done away with. So that is how we can say deconstruction, it criticizes or it challenges the notion of binary oppositions. And here another concept introduced by Derrida. It was not coined by Derrida. Aporia was always there. It comes from a Greek word which means puzzle or state of being in a puzzle, and aporia is actually a perfect word when it comes to deconstruction. So in deconstructive reading, it suggests an inherent contradiction found in any text. It is a point of undesirability which locates the site at which the text most obviously undermines its own rhetorical structure, dismantles or deconstruct itself. So here, aporio means, as I said, it's a Greek word which means a puzzle or state of being in a puzzle. So it's a rhetorically useful expression of doubt. When you are in a state of doubt, or you can say that deconstructionists, they believe in bursting of the text into multiple fragments, and it celebrates this possibility of multiple interpretations rather than what the text prescribes. So reaching the point of multiple interpretations where you realize that a single meaning is not possible gets you into a puzzle, and that is what is called as aporia. So let's go back to the question and let's look at the options once again. Deconstructionist critics argue that texts are never free from. Deconstructionist critics argue that texts are never free from the equivocal and ironically unstable worldview of the author. So here we can say that that is not something the deconstructionists argue, because they are actually they never bother about the author. B, the material conditions that determine the production and reception. That is also not something that comes with deconstruction. It is something that is related to new historicism or cultural studies, so Marxism, etc. So here then the third one, distortions inherent in the rhetoricity of language. That is actually a correct statement, because according to deconstructionism, texts are never free from the distortions that are inherent. There is nothing outside the text. Everything is within the text. That is what Derrida says. And then D, the interpretations bestowed by the totalizing critic. That's also not something, because there is nothing called a totalizing thing in deconstruction. So here the correct answer is option C. Deconstructionist critics argue that texts are never free from distortions inherent in the rhetoricity of language. So the correct answer is option C. So that was one question that was asked from December 2018. The next, let's look at the question which was asked in June 2019. A question that was asked in June 2019. Which of the following sociologist ideas on the practice of receiving and giving gifts are used by J. Hillis Miller to reinforce her arguments in the essay Critic as a Host? Which of the following sociologist ideas on the practice of receiving and giving gifts are used by J. H. Miller to reinforce his arguments in the essay Critic as a Host? Okay, so here you have to identify the sociologist whose ideas on practicing of receiving and giving gifts are used by Miller in the essay Critic as a Host. So that is one question. So here let's look at J.H. Miller and Critic as a Host. So Miller has written this essay called The Critic as a Host, and it can be viewed as a reply to M.H. Abrams, who presented a paper that is the Deconstructive Angel. So J.H. Miller, so here the thing is that the M.H. Abrams, he criticizes the methods and the practices of deconstruction and also the methods of Miller in his essay The Deconstructive Angel. So J.H. Miller, he wrote this Critic as a Host in order to support his ideas on deconstruction and also to criticize J.H. Miller. He made the case that words and text lack objective outside or providing meaning didn't mean they were the prison house of language, but instead they were a place of joy where the critics had the freedom to associate and provide various possibilities, eventually guiding the meaning. So here you can find that J.H. Miller, he made the case. So he was supporting the claim of Derrida that there is nothing outside the text. So that's what he says. The text lacks the objective outside or this meaning. It is not something like a prison house of language where everything is inherent, but instead they are a place of joy where this free movement is possible. A free play is possible. And how is this free play possible? This free play is possible only when the center keeps on shifting. Okay, the movement of the center or the shifting of the center is something that allows the free play, and that is what it makes the place of joy. That is what he says, where the critics had the freedom to associate and provide various possibilities, eventually guiding the meaning, because there is no ultimate meaning for a particular text. So that's about J.H. Miller and his essay, The Deconstructive Angel. So once again, let's look at the question. Which of the following sociologist ideas on the practice of receiving and giving gifts are used by J.H. Miller to reinforce her arguments in the essay Critic as a Whole? So the options are Emily Durkheim, Max Weber, Marcel Mauss and Daniel Bell. So the correct answer is option C, Marcel Mauss. So that's the correct answer, Marcel Mauss. That's the correct answer. So here J.H. Miller uses the analogies given by Marcel Mauss. So that's a question that was asked in June 2019. So from this very pattern, it's very clear that you can expect at least one question from deconstruction in every NET exam. So now let's look at the next question. In December 2019, there was another question that was asked from deconstruction, which is also a very direct, very simple question. Which two of the following are associated with deconstruction? So all you have to do is to figure out which among the two theorists are associated with deconstruction. And if you know deconstruction just by the name, you know that Derrida is always associated with deconstruction. So all you have to do is find the next personality. So here the options are Jacques Derrida, Raymond Williams, Paul de Man and Jonathan Dohimore. Okay, so these are the questions. So now let's, as I said earlier, deconstruction, it is launched by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida in his paper Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of Human Science, which he presented in 1966 at Johns Hopkins University when they celebrated the success of structuralism. So that was the birth of the monster called deconstruction. So here we have this Yale School, and here the Yale School is actually a colloquial name which includes a group of theorists or literary critics and philosophers of literature that are influenced by Derrida's deconstruction or Derrida's philosophy of post-structuralism. So many of the theorists, they were affiliated with the Yale University, and that is why they use the colloquial term the Yale School. And this group, it includes the high-profile literary scholars such as Paul Dayman, Jeffrey Hardman, J.H. Miller, and Harold Bloom. Paul Dayman, Jeffrey Hardman, J.H. Miller, and Harold Bloom. So now let's look at the questions. Which two of the following are associated with deconstruction? So we know the one sure answer is Derrida, because even deconstruction was inaugurated by or was brought up by Derrida. Then we have Paul Dayman, another Yale critic. So A and C comes as the answer. A and C comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B, that is Derrida and Paul Dayman. Okay. Now let's move on to the next question, and this was a question that was asked in June 2020. In June 2020, there was one question from deconstruction, and here also you have to identify which among the identify the most appropriate statement regarding post-structuralism. Okay, so as I said earlier, you have to understand what post-structuralism actually means in order to answer this question. So which one of the following assumptions best expresses the position of post-structuralist criticism? Definite structures underlie empirical events. Definite structures underlie empirical events. Language is representational. Apprehension of reality is a construct. Knowledge operates according to procedures that are axiomatic. So these are the four options that are given. So we discussed about deconstruction, so post-structuralism. So post-structuralism, as I said earlier, it got inaugurated at a center, Johns Hopkins University, where all these theorists, critics and philosophers came in order to celebrate the success of this literary movement called structuralism. So post-structuralism, it is actually a literary and philosophical work that builds upon and at the same time rejects the ideas of structuralism, because many critics, especially Derrida, felt that there were many limitations for structuralism, and he wanted to cope up with that, and that's how he brought post-structuralism. So it is something that builds upon and at the same time rejects ideas within structuralism. And one of the major idea that you can find in post-structuralism is the shifting of the center, because in structuralism, structure is the center where everything revolves around this structure, while in post-structuralism the center keeps on shifting. Okay, the center keeps on shifting, or you can say the center is under constant erasure, where when one center moves, the another thing. So the margin becomes the center becomes the margin, and this happens as a process. So post-structuralism, it rejects the self-sufficiency of structuralism. So structuralism, according to structuralism, everything that can be explained in language is possible or is fundamental. So that is not something that post-structuralists say. They reject the self-sufficiency of structuralism and interrogation of the binary oppositions that constitute it. So structuralism, it believes in this binary opposition, or it is framed under the foundations of this binary opposition. But you can find that Derrida, he rejects the ideas of binary oppositions, because in binary oppositions always creates a hierarchy where one will always be at the center and the other will always be in the binary or in the margin. The idea of interpreting the world within pre-established structure. The idea of interpreting the world within the pre-established structure. So these are the certain things that you can find post-structuralism rejects from structuralism. And that founding knowledge either on pure experience or on systematic structures is impossible. So a fundamental knowledge or a all-knowing omniscient thing is actually impossible when it comes to deconstruction, be it religion, be it language. This is not something that is possible. Okay, so to understand an object, one must study both the object itself and the systems of knowledge that produce the object. So if you have to understand a particular object, you have to study the object and also the systems of knowledge that produce the object. So Derrida, he extends the notion of the text beyond the boundaries of a physical text to the realms of reality, society, and identity, because this reality, society, and identity are the systems of knowledge that produce the object. So if the physical text is an object, reality, society, and identity are the systems of knowledge that produce the object. So you cannot identify a text without knowing the reality, society, and identity. So reality is a system of shifting signifiers, and everything takes on a textualized form and can be analyzed according to a deconstructive method. So now let's look at the question. Which one of the following assumption best expresses the position of post-structuralist criticism? Definite structures underlie empirical events. Obviously, as we said now, this is something that post-structuralism rejects. It rejects the idea of interpreting the world with pre-established structures. Language is representational. That is also an incorrect statement when it comes to post-structuralism. And apprehension of reality is a construct. That is actually something, because according to Derrida, what he believes that the language, he takes the text to the forms of reality, to the realms of reality. So apprehension of reality is a construct. It can be interpreted according to Derrida. So option C is the correct answer. So let's look. So the correct answer for this question is option C. So anyway, these are the questions that were asked, and there were also other questions that were asked from June 2020, and we will be dealing with the rest of the questions in the next video. So remember that deconstruction, it actually is a very important theory when it comes to net exams, because you can expect at least 1 or 2 questions for every exam from deconstruction, and these questions are quite easy if you really understand what deconstruction is and about the theorist who comes under post-structuralism. So try to understand the writers of post-structuralism, and we will see the further questions in the next video. So that's all for this video. Thank you.